Okay, David. So, some really intense experimentation, some interesting inversions of parts. I think there are a few just out and out wrong notes. I think there's one right there which we'll discuss in the D section. I think it's interesting how you're adding new material here and there. You're inverting some things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and we'll talk about why it might not work. All right. Just a few notes. You don't need to have these sort of number each bar kind of thing in this uh, in this challenge. I just prefer like the bar number over like the system. And so for instance here, like we got the bar number over the the left hand side of the system, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to have all these other little guys added because they just end up distracting me visually, right? So just leave those out next time. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about nuances, okay? Now, sometimes I get after my orchestration challenge and sometimes Patreon score evaluation folks about like not adding enough nuances, but I think sometimes you can go a little too far. So like with this, it was really regular. Like every bar or every couple of bars, there was a surge, right? Then after a while, like your ear just starts to get used to it, right? So I just would say really watch out for that, like because after a while, just if it starts to feel too regular, then it takes the magic away from it, right? So I would just say like maybe you could cut way down on the amount that you put in here, or maybe if you're going to have a lot of surges, maybe some of the accompanying parts could be a little less surgy. It could be more an outgrowth of the just the natural energy of the melody. And sometimes the melody itself, speaking of natural energy and how it rises and falls, sometimes the melody itself would just have the sense of lift, the sense of nuance built right into it, right? And even just like an articulation can be enough of a dynamic nuance that you don't really have to mark a crescendo or not. Okay, all right. So I would say like there's a sort of a mixed bag here in like does the treatment of the melody represent an emotional and timbral progression? Insofar as you add different sort of colors here and there, yes, the timbre, the texture progresses, right? So that's very very cool. As to the concern about pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano, you address that with having these lower pitches down here. Um, there's a concern of things sounding static if there's too much of a same approach. So I think that like you're kind of walking a little bit of a balance, right? The fact that the strings stay really kind of almost rigidly placed in their registers, like all the way throughout. There's a feeling of static, right? Even though you've got like even though you've got these surges and things, and like it's sort of keeping the color differentiated and stuff like that. I still feel like that it really kind of keeps everything in the same place for a long time with such a long intro where you really want to kind of bring out different subtle meanings and so on and so forth. So the approach of just really using solid strings in there, it might sort of weigh things down a little bit, right? But and also just speaking of weight, just like so much timpani in here. There's really a lot of really incredibly solid scoring. So does that is that expressing what's in the piano score, or is that building on it, right? Then like as I was saying, like you like invert certain functions and so on. So here you've got this, da 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 da. Right here, like the thing is that you have it so highly elevated, it is stepping right on top of or just right inside the melody here. You've got this sort of doubled melody here in the violins, and you've got it crossing it kind of in a strange way. We have D in the contrabassoon, A2 Ds in the bassoons, and then 2 octaves higher, right, leaving a sort of a gap in between. you've got the Atu clarinets, right? So you're going to get a phased sound on top of there. You can get a sort of rich, buzzy sound down there, and the it's what it's going to do is it's going to force the clarinets to really stand out, almost as if they were playing octaves. It'll have that same quality, that sort of really kind of tearing at the ear sort of quality, which you can hear in the mock-up. By the way, it's obeying the rules, and by having that much push inside of kind of like interfering with the curve of the melody rather than being subordinate to it as it was in the piano score, right? It just was this little commentary. By making it so important, it just feels a little uncomfortable to me. Like and then kind of the same thing is going on in some of these other things. Like, this is really lovely, the whole idea of this counter melody and so on. And you're adding some things, and that's all cool, but it just seems to really step on the toes of, like, in its positioning, so being so high, it really just seems to once again step on the toes and kind of interfere with our clear perception of where the melody is going. Right? So I would just say, really watch out for the registers of, why are certain things put in certain registers. Right? Just really, before you change them this drastically, just hugely drastically in some cases, really think about why they are in the register that they are, and what is that register doing to support the flow of the music as it's scored. Right? If you make one huge change like that, you may have to change everything. Right? So just be careful. It's sort of like, it's kind of like taking away one toothpick from the toothpick sculpture. Right? Will the sculpture start to fall apart? Right? And I feel in this case, even though, like, it's just got some really beautiful colors and some beautiful experiments, I feel like just the functions of the way that you have sort of changed the register of some of the functions, it just like the flow doesn't seem to be as coherent, right? Like I'm having a hard time telling, like, what's the melody, what's the flow, what is happening in certain parts. Okay? All right, so that is my sort of preliminary thoughts and preliminary warnings. Now, just look at the scoring itself. Okay? So we're starting off with strings and timpani, a little dash of snare drum and tam-tam and so on. I think the tam-tam would end up being a little stronger than the mock-up is telling you, and a little stronger than you imagine. It might have more force. You might consider it to be a bit of an intrusion. The other concern is this kind of thing, like when you are pushing the tam-tam up to sort of flare at a mezzo forte and then bringing it right back down to pianissimo. The percussionist may have to hold back a little bit, or they might need more time. Like, you might want to start the pianissimo here and then get up to mezzo forte there and go back to pianissimo, because if they push the tam-tam to a certain level with a roll, then getting it back down to pianissimo takes a little bit of time, right? So, like, they might flare up to a mezzo forte here and then just stop playing, and then the sound of the tam-tam will just decay naturally, but it might only decay down to, like, mezzo piano or piano, right? So really watch out with this stuff, with pushing, like, any bigger resonant brass like this, tam-tams, gongs, sometimes even in cymbals. I've actually had at least one percussionist complain to me that my rolls were too like the diminuendo on the roll was too sudden, right? And it drove her crazy in this one piece. So anyway, so watch out for that, all right? Okay, so once again, let's focus back on the scoring. Here you say ordinario. Ordinario of what? Right? Did this sort of get dropped in here by accident? Was this originally like sul ponticello or sul tasto or something? All right, so we've got a scoring, just a pretty much, note for note scoring of the piano part here, plus an added bass line down here. So do you really need that really low, this really low scoring from the bass? I mean, think about the original character of the piano part, right? It just had this kind of floating quality as it came in, right? Now, by adding these really big, heavy, low notes, are we interfering with the character to a degree? Then there's the other question here, and that is adding harmony in the timpani, right? So like here you got a D, and then a C and coming back to a D. And here you have B and then A and then back to B, right? So you're creating like a very dense harmony right here. It's basically playing sixths, right? And then like what is the next pitch up is F sharp, right? So it's kind of like an inverted B minor chord. But what is the harmony here? Is it B minor? No, right? It is a D6 chord, right? So the D and the F sharp are not the mediant and the fifth of a B minor chord. The D and the F sharp are the root and the third, and the B is not a root B. It is a added sixth, right? So this is impressionist music. So yeah, and then you end up with this kind of like sort of a sound of an E minor chord, right? But actually it resolves to a G6 chord, right? Where the E is the sixth of the chord. So yeah, so just really watch out for that kind of harmony, because like it really changes the character from like kind of somewhat suspended and luminous and nebulous in a way to a little bit tragic, right? If we over-define a little bit the harmonic character, we lose some of the ambiguity, right? But I mean, like let's forget all about Barvinsky. Yeah, does the scoring work? I mean, it works, but it's like it's very ground heavy, right? It's like it really has a lot of serious weight to it. It's still a really cool idea. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, oh, this is horrible, it doesn't work. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just like, you didn't ask me to come in here and call you a genius, right? So I'm pointing out like concerns, right? You just really might want to think about adding so much weight to like a kind of orchestrating an impressionist piece. Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of the snare, just like little bits. I'm wondering whether or not it could have just been like a roll from pianissimo to mezzo piano, that kind of thing. Maybe just a little bit more in the background. Yeah, and like here, like say, roll from pianissimo to mezzo piano and back, right? Rather than really, having so much white noise as you are sort of winding down everybody else. All right, and this is really cool. Right, and all right, so we have to talk a little bit about how you are slurring your strings. All right, so what does this mean? You're going slur, and then you're slurring some more. You have another slur going to the E, right? So what are these additional slurs for? I don't quite understand. And why do some of these strings have slurs over them and others don't? Okay, by now you probably have watched some of my other evaluations where I really, talk against the problem of the piano style slurring coming up again and again in ways that that slur over repeated notes and slur in ways that the bow, like the bowing of the string players goes on for too long, or maybe just in a way that isn't comfortable and so on. So I would just say, like, try to have shorter bows. Like, when in doubt, shorten the bow a little bit. Not a huge amount. You don't have to have up-down bowing on every single thing in ways that don't make sense. But just think about, like, in a slow piece like this, bowing by the half bar, right? So maybe down, so this would not be slurred, and then maybe slur from here to there. Up, and then no slur, down, right? Up, down, up, down. Do you see what I mean? And then you wouldn't need to slur here because you have this da da da. Right. Now, here's another place where I feel like you have a protuberance of certain melodic elements, right? Like this sudden mezzo forte piccolo, really just like it's suddenly hey, right? So like we have this beautiful smooth lift here to forte on the D, right? But like the wonderful curve, the expressive curve here is being interrupted by the piccolo kind of shouting at a mezzo forte, right? So I mean, I think there's a way of doing this a little more gently. And then also we have a kind of the melodic arc here is at cross purposes, right? Here you are dropping to a D, here you are lifting to a D. So it further confuses what the function is right in here, right? So just really watch out for that. Like, and so much weight. A2 oboes, A2 flutes, and piccolo. Like, so this is 4 wind instruments playing this with coming in right on top of soft violins, right? So, and then they push up to forte, you're dropping down to piano, you eventually meet at piano here at the end. So be careful. Try to have certain, like the some of the expressive arcs should, like you're really worrying about the expressive arcs right in here. You're really fine tuning them, right? Maybe over much as by my standards, but maybe not by yours. So that's all good. But just try to make sure that like things kind of move together in certain ways and don't like crash into each other and sort of cut off the nose of the expressive direction, right? Right, and then that leads to this part right in here where it really is exposed and it really is what I would call piquant, like just really, almost like really spicy. And it's once again just the same exact problem right against like as the strings, once again have this sort of soft and then pushing to loud, it sort of really sticks out and is kind of jarring, whether or not the function is interfering with the melody or not. Right? And this is cool, but couldn't it be like down a little bit? Just sort of maybe, yeah. All right, so you know what? This is really distracting me. I'm just going to change something really quick. So yeah, try to correct that, right? When you submit the score, just really watch out for, like if you had scored the horns in C on a treble staff, right? Just try to correct it back to both in treble clef and transposing, right? It's just easier on me. And then here you have like kind of, this is just maybe a little bit of, be a little careless, 1-3 above, 1-3 below. Probably the proper way to notate this would be this up here would be the first part, and that would be the third part, maybe down here, And then, like, if you really are going to go 1-3, 2-4 down here, then this would actually be, yeah. I guess it's all right. It just, yeah. I'm almost thinking that you don't really even need like A2 playing, like when you get to this. Like if you're trying to balance everything, you've got pianissimo brass below and you got mezzo forte strings above. I'm almost wondering whether or not you need, we're assuming that this is A2 here and A2 there. So first and third here, second and fourth there. I just, especially, and then here you go to piano, and you're going up to an A and then a G. I just would say just ease it back. You do not have to be A2 on your brass, on your trumpets here. Like, they're playing fairly high, and they're going to be doubled anyway by the third trumpet. At least the first and the third horns, the way you've got them scored, will be doubled by first trumpet. So there's really no need for you to have two horns here. It just will really be penetrating. Yeah. So yeah, I think, and especially here, you could just cut back to single horns. All right. And then here you have pianissimo A2 trombones, right? You just need one trombone here. Yeah. In fact, I would say score this part in your tenor trombones, and then don't come in with your bass trombone until this F sharp here, right? So turn this into a second trombone part, and then here, like, this can just be first trombone and bass trombone, right? Right, and here you're saying with timpani and with tuba. Yeah, so... All right, so we have a B, A, B, E, and then the D. I'm just checking your pitches here. E, G, F sharp. Yeah, I mean, it's all playable. It's a little fiddly, and there's some, the player will have to move some things around. Like they might be playing this E with their lowest kettle, and then changing it to an F sharp, and then back to an E, right? And then they'll have to take this C and bring it down to B here, or to B here, right? So it's a little, yeah, it's just a little involved. You know what I mean? I think I know what you want here. You want kind of a more of a baseline kind of a timpani going on here. But yeah, I mean, usually you don't see things like this with timpani, with tuba. I mean, it's usually more like you might have like oboes with violas or something like that, just like so that they really match. They're like really listening to each other and making it work together. But like in this case, because the timpani and the tuba have such different character, like when you're saying with timpani, like are you saying that you want a kind of a, the tuba to have a sort of a kind of an emphasized, like I would almost say like if you're going to have the tuba play with timpani, in fact trying to match what the timpani does, you might be better off with like a pianissimo tenuto, like dotted half note or something, right? Or even dotted eighth note, or maybe like a tenuto staccato, right? To just really match what the timpani is doing. See, and right here, like I would actually be tempted to have the tuba play more notes than the timpani, right? Just have the timpani play notes that are really comfortable and don't require too much fiddling. So like, so that like things like this F sharp could just be covered by the tuba rather than the timpani. All right, and then going on to this. All right, so yeah, and then you have this sort of surge and so on. See, this surge right in here, I'm not philosophically or expressively opposed to, but I just feel that on top of so many surges happening one after the other after the other after the other, it just feels a little like we've heard it before. But like if this were backed way off, then I think that this surge right here would actually work really well. Yeah, really nicely. Yeah, and then all the more reason right in here to not go A2 on the horns with the way that you've got everything scored right in here. Yeah, so just really watch out for too much weight is what I would say, like in this kind of scoring. Alrighty, so now we're getting into the second half of the A section going into the B section. Okay, now on this screen, there are a few things that I have some questions for you about, David, and that is, like, I don't know, like, why did you use this style of roll, like the standard roll mark, and then here you used upward roll marks, right? So what's the difference? Because you don't have any downward roll marks, right? So never use an upward roll mark unless there is a contrasting downward roll mark, right? Because it's completely unnecessary, right? This is the standard roll. Everybody's used to it. Everybody knows what it means. It means to roll from bottom to top. So this is absolutely not needed. And the big problem is that the player will see this in the score and they'll look around and say, well, where's the downward roll, right? Where is that? So you're sort of setting a trap for them. Like if they're conscientious, they might be looking all over the score, and it's just a waste of 5 seconds or whatever, or 10 seconds for the player. Might even be a raised hand at rehearsals for like maybe a semi-pro or community orchestra, and they say, look, there's a bunch of upward rolls here, so is there a downward roll? Right? And then you've just wasted everybody's time, right? So look, just have upward rolls. And the other thing is, do you mean rolls like, when you have rolls here in these things, are they intended to roll all the way across the instrument, or just roll in both hands, like both hands starting at the same time, ending at the same time? Do you know what I mean? So like, just I'm not sure whether there's a differentiation here, because like you have, you're rolling a couple of notes in the left hand. So what does that mean, right? Are you just going ding, or do you really intend to go ding, right? So if you do, then just have the roll mark cross all the way across. Okay. Now, there is a sort of a tendency that I'm jokingly calling phrases interruptus. And I mean, I think you've fallen into the trap to a degree, and you've prevented it in another way, right? So the trap is something I tried to prevent in the in my pitfalls video, which I maybe I was not clear enough about it, but it was that when you get to places like where the 12/8 starts, that there are little bits, there are little kind of chopped up little bits of left hand, but they connect with middle voice notes, right? So to get the sort of smooth flow that we're seeing in the left hand, or that we're hearing in the left hand part, obviously we're not hearing chopped up bits when Violina Petrochenko plays, right? She makes it really all smooth, so that it's more like, rather than just transcribing notes that are in the MIDI file or the Sibelius file, it's more a matter of interpreting what the pianist is doing, right? Which is why I always try to have a first class pianist like Violina this year, and then that guy who did the file last year, who posted their work on IMSLP, and then below that we had Sophia Orr. She's just she's got 10 fingers on each hand. She's just amazing. So really listen to the performance. What is the performance saying? Not just the notes in the file or the notes on the score, right? So the notes in the file are showing that there's a beautiful flow going all the way across the functions, right? Now, okay, so with that big lecture, the thing is, you're supplying those notes in different registers, really far away from what you end up interpreting in violas and harps. And so filling in, to the extent that you fill that in with something of the same character of pizzicato, you're working your way around the problem. But to the extent that it's really kind of chopped up and there isn't the kind of feeling of smooth flowing, then I think that you're falling into the trap. And then here, there's more, couldn't the pizzicato have continued on and maybe accompanied some of the middle voice stuff that happens at the end of each bar, right? Just so that there's more of a sense of flow. And then we have the added problem that that harp, especially harp in its lower register, it just gets swallowed up by the orchestra. So everything that you're hearing in the mock-up here of the this beautiful flowing harp kind of continuing on, keeping the pattern strong, while you've got half of your winds and trombones and trumpets and so on, and all the string section, and also this big roll on tam tam with this, which has got the just let it vibrate kind of a sound. All right. That will just basically just kill the harp right in here. So you might hear a few notes here and there, but you're not going to hear it with anywhere near the clarity that you're hearing it in the mock-up. All right. So just really just go back, check out my pitfalls video. Check out the 12 common scoring errors. I think I need to make one that just really specifically addresses low notes in the flute, and one that really specifically addresses how harp just basically cannot compete against really strong scoring. Okay, so just this, I mean, it's a cool idea. I wish that it had been in a different instrument, maybe clarinets, or maybe bass clarinet's not doing anything. Maybe a combination of bass clarinet and English horn could have interpreted this. Another thing too is that if you have pizzicato happening in the strings, even at pianissimo, it's basically going to swallow anything that is happening in the harp. It just really, there's. The harp just doesn't have any defense against pizzicato. It just, pizzicato is much stronger and much more pointy, right? And so it just kind of eats up the kind of gentle, beautiful luminosity of the harp. Now, one last little thing is that you've got a lot of lower notes in this celesta part, and, against, once again, a tutti that's surging. And the truth is, once again, just like the harp, the celesta will get swallowed. So, better to score things higher. This is a better chord than this, right? It's just just bringing it up a fifth. The first octave of the celesta really is, it's almost a throwaway. it has kind of chunky, clunky sort of sounds rather than kind of beautifully glowing bell-like sounds like you would get from a vibraphone over the same pitches, right? So it's really better to score it from its own middle C up is like really its best, its most ideal pitches. Yeah, so like right in here, this is all really cool. Just, being aware, right? Like here, this is identically scored. Being aware that that the celesta sounds an octave higher than written, and the harp is sounding concert pitches, right? So, right. Okay. All right. So, but let's just talk about the scoring. Okay. So here, I just felt a little unnerving that the actual melody note wasn't coming through here, right? Which is B A B E, right? And so instead we've got F sharp, E, F sharp, and then ending on a B. So like everything is like these are essentially these are the middle voice pitches, right? And it's you got the middle voice pitches, and then like the right in here like this like the clarinet right in here is like so I mean we're kind of losing track of where the melody is because the middle voice has basically taken over, and I mean, and it's kind of cool. I like the way that this sort of works its way into the horns and the trumpet. I think that's actually really strong, right? Yeah, but once again, like where is the I feel like I'm sort of losing the thread because of just the dropping the main melody here, over, to my mind, maybe not to yours, but to my mind, overemphasizing certain subsidiary parts into dominant positions, to where it's like the sense of continuity, the overall sense of continuity, of thematic continuity, and so on, is just kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to hold on to. That's not to say that the scoring is necessarily bad or anything like that. This is kind of cool, like the way that you have managed your bass instruments right in here, and the scoring right here in the brass is really beautiful actually. And this is really kind of cool right in here. But like, why are the winds all playing like separated notes and the strings playing these nice gushy slurs? Now, like right here, this slur is. Why slur across the downbeat? I don't understand. So here you're slurring across the downbeat. Here you're playing the downbeat in all these instruments. So, wouldn't it be better to divide this up with half the bar gets the first slur and the second half gets the next slur, right? Or if you are going to slur all the way up here and then have da, right? And then do the same thing here, da, da, down bow, not slurring across it. And once again, we have really big surges of energy, and here it kind of worked. It wasn't quite so distracting, right? Sometimes, like, you can distract too much by having really, just really fine-tuned, really emphasized nuances that you kind of repeat over and over again. This is all really cool, though. I really love the trombones and the trumpets working together here. It's very nice, and about the only thing I would worry about is the possibility that some of these, some of the middle voice going on here in the clarinets, some of these lower pitches in the oboes and so on, would just kind of get eaten up by the brass. Right? Like, for instance, this F sharp here in the clarinets, in the oboes, I meant to say. That is basically going to get just hammered by the third trumpet right in here and so on. So it's just like how much is being contributed by what instrument. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, and then this is really cool going into this part. Okay, but like I was worried about the sense of continuity here. Like, this is the part where the line reaches up and it wanders down, right? So like it's just kind of really, you have these winds and strings, the winds are not going diminuendo, so they're just going to suddenly cut off. Same thing, like here you have this beautiful diminuendo. It's perfect. So why wasn't that in the winds? Right? Just why couldn't we just bring the winds, everything down to this really nice fine point while the harp was continuing on? And then here the harp doesn't really seem to seem to connect with the strings that come after it. It's just like harp, 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 string, 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 string. You know what I mean? It's like there isn't like a real. I don't really feel that these parts connect. Like maybe if the harp had like finished on a G, right? Like if there had been some kind of dovetailing or something, or maybe if the strings had really come in like maybe incredibly soft, like maybe at triple P or even like quadruple P. I just had a thing about extreme dynamics, so maybe not quadruple P, but triple P. Like they just started in on this line with the harps, and then they kept going, and they sort of kind of came into their own or around piano, and you had the harp like continue on and then just fade away or something like that. It just was some way of it just feels like it feels like a wound almost to me, and it's just like it's the transition is so quick. I mean, it's like all these ideas are really cool, like the scoring that you have here and the winds and the brass and the strings. That's gorgeous. It's really beautiful, but like how does it connect to the next idea, right? Is the big question. Because this is going to be, it's like even though you have everything marked really soft and so on, you have pizzicato there, and you have and then the next thing is it's just really kind of strange. You have all these doubled pitches, but slurred. So I mean, so what does that mean? Do you mean for this all to be sort of played legato, but because I mean, it's almost like these two markings are against each other, right? Like the idea that the pitches double, and the idea that there is a slur over them, right? And then here you have ordinario again. So what does that mean, right? What was the part that you had to go? What was extraordinario, right? Was it the tremolo? Because you don't need to correct tremolo with ordinario. All right, so I'm just puzzled, the use of ordinario. You don't need ordinario to correct pizzicato either. You should use arco, right? So like I'm seeing a few things. Then here you're saying flautando. Usually flautando would be like more on a higher pitch, kind of a higher, more wispy pitch, rather than like say middle C in violas. I just want to take a closer look at this. Like I think my eyes are playing tricks on me. Yeah, they are. Okay. Okay, and then once again, like the line starts to climb here. Oboes, clarinets, right? And we've got them in octaves, and then we're kind of this part of the octave is being doubled by the harp, and then the celeste is an octave higher, right? If this is intended to transpose the way that it should be. That connects really, really well going forwards. See, so like on the previous page where like there kind of was a disconnect, here it's just beautifully connected, right? Yeah, so it just kind of puzzles me even more, like that the harp to the strings thing, it was kind of so disjointed, and this is just so beautifully, beautifully smooth. I would put a big slur over the whole harp part, just, to kind of make sure that it was a lot like the piano part, right? So this is where I would bring in the pianistic type slurring. Now, once again, we have upward rolls. There's zero need for this, David. I mean, if you have submitted a score to me before and I commented, look, don't put in the upward rolls, and you're putting in upward rolls now, don't just write it on the wall and, in permanent ink, all right? Don't use upward rolls unless there's a downward roll. I'm not seeing any downward rolls in this piece. And in fact, even if you had, like, say, downward rolls like way later in the piece, you still would just need a standard roll. You would not need the upward roll marking unless there was close by there was a downward roll, so there might be some confusion, right? So just don't use everybody out there. Repeat after me. I will not use an upward roll unless there is a downward roll happening right after it or nearby it. Okay? All right, so stop with the upward rolls. All rolls are upward, right? And once again, I'm kind of questioning whether or not this is like whether the roll is intended to cross both hands, like, rather than both hands going da-da or da-da at the same time. So, like, for instance, this is just it's almost like a grace note, right? Ba-bum. Whereas with a roll, it would be da-da-da-dum. Okay. All right. So I love this part right in here, going up to C, but, like, what happened to, B, A, B, A, G, E, right? There's a whole missing phrase right in here, like, which got cut out. So this is sort of kind of more of that, taking important parts away, making subsidiary parts more important kind of a thing. So just really watch out for that, okay, David? I mean, like, you have such beautiful sections of scoring. They're just gorgeous. And then, like, the functions are kind of reversed or taken out, or, and then I just feel like the piece starts to fall apart a bit, right? And then there's also, like, the question of just really how much do you need to underline this, right? Like, here you have contrabassoon. Wow, just the gruntiest sounds way down there. Bassoon, clarinet, right? They're just all playing all this stuff. And then, what do you have in the harp and the celesta? Just these tiny little, just this will get completely swallowed up by what's happening here in your horns, trombone, winds, and so on, right? So, like, you can just kind of throw this stuff out the window. Nothing's gonna really happen. Now, we're here with the flute and the oboe and harp and celesta. That's beautiful. That will work great. I have this other problem too, and that is that everybody is kind of like, here you got the oboes and the flutes and the clarinets, and they're all playing this beautiful arc, and they're all headed the same direction. And then suddenly you leap up in the flutes, right? And so, like, the sense of continuity, like the beautiful arc, that wonderful mountain has got, like, this hitch in it all of a sudden, right? Like, the audience can't actually hear the line descending anymore because you have something so important that has just popped up here, right? And really leapt up. So, like, maybe the flute should have been playing higher notes before, or maybe you should just, like, have this play the way that it's scored, like, have the flute and the oboe part. It's fine if the flute and the oboe are, like, down to C, it's all fine, like, in the doubling and the balance and everything else, and the way that you got this scored with the harp and the celeste. You could have even had a lower flute part, right? Because everything is so soft, and it's not, it's nothing is necessarily blasting over anything else. But, like, why couldn't the flute and the oboe have just, like, if your destination was E, why couldn't they have just doubled each other, and then you just jump up to E here with the flute part, and then, of course, ending with an E here in the oboe part, right? I just feel like this obtrudes. It just really, it's like it's sort of suddenly stands out. Like, I don't know if you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it sort of reminds me of, one of the earthbenders stomping their foot and a big cliff suddenly appearing, sort of shooting up out of the ground. So I just feel that same kind of sense of interruption to the beautiful arc of the scale as Barvinsky composed it. And then of course you have this is lovely here, this trill. I think that's really great, but I just really am missing these notes in here, right? B, A, B, A, G, and then E, right? Which is, like, rather than being really high, right? And you could have, like, had a piccolo or even just your standard flute come in on those high notes, B, A, B, A, G, and then E, da, do, D, do, do, and so on, right? But it's just like their absence is just, it just really, it's like this big gap all of a sudden. Okay, and then here, gorgeous scoring. Okay, now some things are misapplied. We'll talk about those in a second. But wow. Just like, it's the way that you start here is so powerful. Okay, flautando in the strings, that's all great. Okay. But then you start to grow, like you get mezzo forte, and then you get to forte and fortissimo. Fortissimo, you still want it flautando? Right? I think you should give up on the flautando right here. Right? When you start to crescendo forwards to mezzo forte, that's just like, there's kind of no need for it anymore, right? So flautando is a kind of a it is sort of an effect that it's like sounding like a flute, right? So it is a fast, light passage of the bow, played in a position that is closer to sul tasto, usually just because that is a kind of an easier. It's like there's nothing about that area that is necessarily more or less conducive to the flautando. Like some people would argue, well, the sul tasto sound helps to sort of balance out the flautando sound. Okay, fair enough. Okay, but it's a sort of a soft. It's kind of a slower, soft. A faster, softer passage of the bow over the strings, right? So that gives it a kind of a flute-like sound, right? So by its very nature, you cannot have these long, like you cannot have a tie slur. A tie, then slurring to another tie, and that just sort of lasts even at a faster tempo like this. It just is not a flautando bowing. So it would be better to just like to have all of these to be single bows in flautando, And in no way is it going to last this long with a proper flautando, like even at the tempo you're going, right? Okay. All right. So, and then you have col legno in here at mezzo forte. So col legno has got to be the loudest thing, right? So everybody else should just shut the hell up. Your double basses should be playing piano. Your pizzicato viola should be playing should be playing piano, and your cello should be playing col legno at mezzo forte. Okay, and then that's a balance, and then the harp can come through better, right? And then you've got horns in here. I would mark them piano as well, right? And then you've got a beautiful balance. But then, as soon as this music starts to grow, as soon as you start to push to a mezzo forte, then a forte in your brass, forget about you can hear it on the mock-up, right? What happens to the col legno? It disappears. I love the fact that you're keeping one of the pitches on an open G, right? That's exactly right? Just like you want to limit the range of pitches. Like, for instance, in the Symphonie Fantastique last lecture that I'm about to start editing, they're like... Berlioz is just like having his violin players just bounce away on like a high E, right? So it's just, it's real easy for them, and it's as a high note, it's fairly resonant and so on. Like the most resonant of all would be like an open E string though, or an open G string, as we see in Holst's Planets. So yeah, that's actually pretty well written col legno, but as I'm saying. Like, col legno is such a soft effect. Here you have this rolled, you're rolling your snare drum to forte from piano, and you're rolling your, tam-tam is even worse, right? This, right? And then what happens after this? Is this intended to let it vibrate, or do you want a sudden cutoff, right? Okay. But look, if we take, let's say we just took out all of this fancy stuff, pizzicato on your cellos, leave the markings where they are, forget about the flautando, just make that piano and crescendo, just take away all the special effects, and then all of a sudden all the problems in your score are fixed, right? If you're gonna do like staccato on the timpani, better just to use quarter notes, all right? So you have rest, quarter note, and then quarter note, rest, quarter note, rest. It's just like it's almost like working against it to like have a longer have a longer duration. Like it's totally playable and totally readable and everything else, and everybody knows what you want, but it's just a little kind of the duration sort of works against the marking. Do you know what I mean? All right. And then, of course, by the time you get to here with this surge, with everything around it, forget about the harp. It's gone. And especially just in the first place, with all the other notes, pizzicato and so on that are around it. Like here at the beginning, if you were to take my advice, reduce this to piano, reduce everybody to piano except for col legno, mezzo forte, and then the harp continued on at mezzo forte, then yeah, it's got a chance for the next 3 bars. But then pushing to mezzo forte and bringing in the brass and all this other stuff, forget it, the harp is gone. All right. Now this right in here is really cool. Like, there's so many good bits to your scoring, right? I feel like I'm sort of wasting time a little bit in talking about the things that need to be fixed. I'm not spending enough time saying, oh wow, this worked out great and that worked out great, and so on and so forth. And I do intend to tell you when it does work, but like, like you need to hear what needs to be fixed, right? You don't really need me to say you're a genius, right? You need me to help you get closer to that goal, right? And surpass me. Who knows, right? Okay. Then xylophone. This was so cool. Soft xylophone, extra soft xylophone, and harp, right? This is just a beautiful combination. I would not have the harp pianissimo here. I would have it more like mezzo piano. All right, and then yeah, and of course now ordinario makes sense with this being flautando here. Okay, but of course like flautando like with these long loud it's against the I would just go see if you can find an example of somebody playing flautando on YouTube. Okay? It's just like a zooming bow. Like the bow's going zoom, 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 and it's going zoom in a really soft way over the strings, right? So it creates this kind of kind of a sound, right? I think almost what you intend here is more like sul tasto, right? Like so, if you just go sul tasto, it's great. Pushing up to a mezzo forte on sul tasto, I would go to ordinario around here. Okay, and when you're pushing to forte. All right. But yeah, just all of this is so cool, so nicely done. Just touch of triangle in here, and then these horns once again, sort of kind of doing what they did before, but really working great. And just like this sort of like little raindrops and kind of echoing raindrops. It's just such great stuff in here, David. Just so nice. And the way that it all combines with the strings, the little pizzicato parts, and just so nice. Really, really nice. And the octaves and the strings, right? See, like here you're using the functions as scored in the original piano part, to their best advantage. Just beautifully done. It's sort of like this kind of makes up for leaving out parts and putting the middle voice on top and losing the main melody and things like that in previous pages, right? But just really nicely done. So it's all pushing forwards. Yeah, I'm not so sure about mezzo forte as a marking here, but like it works in the mock-up. So, but maybe it doesn't need the crescendo. Right, so here on this page, it just kind of continuing on. I almost wonder if it could have been marimba rather than xylophone, but and under the harp rather than Anyway, all right. So we have this crescendo to forte. We're adding more voices in the horns. All right, and then right in here, I feel like maybe correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, right? But I feel that when you got to here, like maybe you were running out of time, right? Because you have this. There's a sort of beautiful raindrop, sprinkling kind of of an effect, right? Pushing into this, and then like I just feel like there's a big gap, right? We're seeing gaps, of course, just in the scoring, just because of the way that the page is laid out. But it just seems like there is sort of a gap in the sense of continuity, like of texture, right? So, like a lot of this stuff comes to an end, and there's and then all of a sudden we're just left with strings and horns and kind of limited motion here in like pizzicato, lower strings and so on and so forth, and just kind of more of a smooth transcription of the elements that are in the score. But it works for scoring, but I just feel it's like compared to the breathtaking stuff that happened before it, and then this more integrated stuff that you have afterwards. There's just feels like there's a gap here, right? And just watch out for things like this double bar belongs here, right? Not here. What if I can't drag it. Yeah, see, so that's more where you want it, right? Because it sort of interrupts it, just because there's an odd tempo there, right? All right, so now we're getting into the real nitty gritty. Okay. Um, yeah. All right, so it's just like a question of like how much works here. Now, like marimba, like you are giving the marimba an incredibly important part. Now, I mean, it's sort of strange the way that you have got the dynamics here, right? So what are the dynamics in the score? Fortissimo, right? And here we got forte in the melody line and some forte timpani and then like mezzo piano in our bass notes. You're really giving your tuba player a lot of room to breathe. That's cool. And piano sempre, right? I mean, it's really weird. Like, if you listen to the mock-up, it kind of works, right? Once again, we have a staccato dotted note, right? Just make it a quarter note, right? Yeah, and then yeah, those mezzo piano bass notes, and then this, like this ends up kind of being a snare drum solo the way that you've got it scored. So I just would really watch out for that. Like you don't want the snare drum to take over everything, right? All right. Well, look, the problem is this. All right, just like this is the biggest problem that is facing you now. You have got melody at forte in your winds, in your upper strings, upper winds, upper strings. You've got intervals in a single bass clarinet part, right? You need to one of these pitches needs to go, and you've got and then you've got bass clef or bass clarinet. I wonder why I didn't notice that yet and correct it. But anyway, all right. So you've got this sort of loud melody line in here, right? Loudish. You got mezzo forte brass right in here, heavy brass. There's just no way in hell that this marimba is going to cut through. Xylophone, fine. Go check out my tip on why xylophone is so much louder than marimba, and it has to do with the way the overtones are shaped for the tone bars. The tone bars of a xylophone are more shaped like that of a clarinet. They're odd numbered partials, so they really have they're piquant to reuse that word. Whereas marimba is using like the more just the more generic kind of overtones that you get from like say an oboe or a flute or whatever. And so it doesn't stand out as much. So you're giving it an incredibly important part right in here. There's just real surging, those surging triplets that go up and down and so on and so forth. And you're handing it over to the marimba part. I don't care what this mock-up says. There's just absolutely no way that this is going to be able to play with a necessary aggression and momentum to just really carry through this tutti passage, right? This should be a horn part, right? Look, your horns aren't doing anything, right? And really, I mean, do you want this to be forte, mezzo forte, piano sempre, and the tuba and mezzo piano, in your lower strings? I mean, is that? It just seems really soft, really softish, right? And then, right in here. Yeah. And there like isn't much of a dynamic arc, right? Now when we get to this high point, da 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 ba 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 ba, I'm not really seeing the yeah. Yeah. I'm not seeing that really incredible, once again you've got intervals in your bass clarinet part, right? It's a single instrument, as far as I can tell. Also, you're not telling us when you're going, from intervals to A2, and just there's a lot of basic housekeeping that you need to do. I'm going to have let's face it, what is the orchestration challenge long overdue for? Is for a checklist, right? Go through this, check that, check that, check that, check that, and then if you do that, that's all the more I don't have to say, right? So, I mean, more work for you. But the thing is that, like, that frees me up to talk about more subtleties, more things in your scoring, that aren't on the checklist, that, things that are more basic. Yeah, and then like here, like we're the heavy brass, they're kind of letting go in a lot of places of their kind of essential function that is being given to your mallet instruments. Then right in here, you have your two softest instruments in the entire orchestra are also kind of playing some of those arcing parts, right? And yeah, the trombone's starting to come in, and bassoons and so on, clarinet, but just kind of they're more randomly placed, right? They don't really have the same real beefiness, right? Right. The just kind of the more barking, kind of aggressive. I mean, this, what does Barvinsky reveal in his prelude? I mean, there's like a veneer of simplicity over the top of it. But if you just really dig into the emotionalism, the emotional information, just ignore my cat. Come here, buddy. Come on. Ignore my cat. Anyways, if you just really dig into that, into like what is he saying, is like the pain, right? Just the real, the pain and the anguish and the confusion, right? It's not just a beautiful landscape, right? There are layers of different emotions. So, I mean, it's a beautiful, like, there's a lot of beauty to this, though, like, in the way that you interpreted it. I mean, I think if you were going to take this really kind of more laid back approach, kind of more randomized, more spread out across different things, then I would lighten up on the melody, right? So it's just like, it's that kind of thing. How can I improve the approach that you have taken? I would say lighten up on the melody a little bit. Right? And then like you have this big surge of color, right? But it's like it's not moderated. Like you don't push in from a soft dynamic to the top and then just back out again so that it's a smooth connection with, there's a smooth fade in and out of, rather than just being this really blocky thing that suddenly starts in the winds and then ends, right? So like boom, crash, right? Like you kind of want to avoid that kind of approach, I would say. But look, give your horns more to do. Even if you're going to stick with the approach that you've got, don't assume that your mallet instruments, even the xylophone, which is really loud, don't assume that it really has the carrying power to be playing over instruments like trumpets. And it just like with the approach that you've got moving back and forth, you've got two trombones, right? You've got three trumpets. You have all these horns, right? There's so much more that they could be doing. You have got two clarinets. You've got two bassoon players, right? I think that this could have been built out a little bit, right? And could, like, I think that the approach that you're taking here could have been expanded even more and integrated more across the entire orchestra, to where like some of these potential weaknesses that I'm talking about would actually be strengths. Okay, so that is just my impression of it. Yeah, and then like here, when it just really is, going da 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 da. I just feel that more. Does it really connect up, like, and leave us on this chord with the instruments leading into it? Some of them have a rest and then are followed by a note, right? Whereas the continuity going forwards, where it's just the young Barvinsky, 18 years old, I think, when he wrote this, he's just really kind of like, this is the anguish I'll have to deal with for the rest of my life. And then he relaxes into actual somberness, right? Not misinterpreting his harmony, but just really obviously into very light kind of tragedy, right? A lighter sense of tragedy. So yeah, a lot of depths in this. It's really, really an amazing, there really is an amazing score that it's based on, and then you are kind of finding your own place in it. Yeah. Well, Well, I better stop now because I got to let my cat out. And you know, I think I've taken you to the section where you need to go. So just think about some of those things. You know, don't worry too much about my personal likes and dislikes. Just focus on, you know, whether or not the scoring works and so on. So you know, once again, don't count on marimba to be able to carry anything for you, or harp or celesta in a passage that probably should be fortissimo rather than, you know, than the softer dynamics that you've got at Mart. But I mean, you know, it's really interesting that you did kind of really back off on the dynamics. I mean, that is kind of interesting. And just watch out for things like this. You know, I mean, what does that slur need to be there for? What is it really doing? Right? Wouldn't you rather just have like a nice firm down bow on an accent, and then an up bow on the tenuto and a down bow on the accent, right? And what does this need to be there for? It doesn't need to be there. Anyway, but like really cool score, David. I mean, just yeah. So just like really watch out for. I think from now on, I'm going to be having pitfalls videos. Really watch them closely. Watch out for my 12 common scoring errors and check out the checklist. All right, and I think it'll just tie up a few of those loose ends, and you know, things like, you know, harp trying to survive against heavy brass and things like that. Things that, you know, you don't need to bother with in your scoring. I mean, you have such cool ideas of texture and just wonderful chord voicings and things like that. It's just, you know, it's obvious that like you're getting more and more comfortable, and you know, and you just have so many great ideas of your own, and you're adding to your toolbox and everything else. So just I really enjoyed it a lot, and I want you to keep these coming. All right, I really would love to see what you have got to show me next year and the year after and the year after. Please, you know, at the very least, be here for our 10th anniversary in 3 years. But let's see what you could do next year. All right, and the year after. So great job. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for supporting on Patreon, for helping me send some support over to those musicians in Ukraine. And thanks for everybody out there who's been watching this far. You guys are filled with suggestions. You probably are already starting to write them down below. Keep going with that. And, you know, thanks to all my other patrons. Thanks to my website subscribers and everybody in the community. You guys are just really making this possible, and I am enjoying the hell out of it, even though I'm working my butt off here at the end of the year. You know, this is like about a month ago when I was starting to say, oh no, you know, and people are saying, oh, what's wrong, you know, or do you have surgery? Well, I actually did have really minor surgery, just like completely forgettable. But yeah, I mean, just the way that my schedule was getting messed up by everything happening at once. So I'm going to be having huge amounts of fun catching up over the next 2 weeks. But you're going to see lots and lots of videos coming down the pike kind of all at once as we get towards the end of the year. And, you know, you guys really have been waiting for long enough. So here they come. See you all very soon.